Hi, and welcome to today's Humpday Hangout. We're being brought to you by our great friends at Rescue Air. The Rescue Air company for more than 20 years has been known around the world as an innovator and leader in firefighter air replenishment systems. That technology, what's called the FARS technology, or Firefighter Air Replenishment Systems, is an innovative systems of standpipes that are permanently installed in buildings to deliver a safe, reliable, and constant supply of fresh breathing air for firefighters when we need it the most. High-rise fires, large structures, the systems can be fitted to almost any kind of building you can imagine. Firefighters can refill their bottles at these stations in less than a minute throughout the building using a quick connect feature and make that air available right there inside these complex high-rise structures. So rather than dragging 30, 40 extra bottles up, we can now refill our bottles through these firefighter air replenishment systems, which Rescue Air is the leader in. This company was founded in 1989 and has designed and built firefighter air replenishment systems and installed them in more than 400 buildings throughout the United States. The International Code Council recently added firefighter air replenishment systems to the 2015 International Fire Code underneath Appendix L. And Jack Murphy, who's with us today, will be talking to you more about that. The company's mission is built on a legacy of safety. Rescue Air advances that mission through its technology, its products, its services, and its commitment to quality customer service. It's got a great bunch of support organizations who are behind it, such as the Fire Smoke Coalition, which it supports very, very robustly, the Firefighter Cancer Support Network, which we're all extremely concerned about and diligently working. Remember, their gala is November the 7th in Los Angeles. National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, and remember, this weekend is the National Fallen Firefighters Memorial Day weekend. The International Association of Fire Chiefs, the International Association of Firefighters, and many, many more, to include FDIC, Fire Engineering, and all of us here with the Penwell Fire Group, Fire Rescue, and Firefighter Nation. So to Rescue Air, thank you so much. At the end of the broadcast, please go to their website and check it out. It's just put in Rescue Air Systems. It'll take you right to their website. Ton of information there to learn about how you can get these systems retrofitted into the buildings you currently have, and more importantly, have them always into the new building construction that's going on in your communities. Without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our lead host for today. That would be Captain Mike Dugan, retired off the FDNY, off of ladder 123. And Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Bobby, and thank you again to Rescue Air for sponsoring this, and thanking Fire Engineering and the Penwell Fire Group for putting this all together. Joining me today, as we're going to talk about technology and high-rise firefighting and how we're making it safer, are going to be Todd Harms, an Assistant Chief of the Phoenix Fire Department, and they are using the Rescue Air systems in their buildings. Jack Murphy, the Chairman of the New York City Fire Safety Directors, and a fire safety director, and very, very knowledgeable about the technical stuff, the building code stuff that's coming into these buildings. And Kurt Isaacson, Battalion Chief with Escambia County Fire and Rescue. And we're going to start talking about some of the different things that are in there and the FARS system. So because of his technical knowledge, I'm going to throw the first question to Jack Murphy about the FARS systems and how they work in the buildings and how this technology is making us better. Because back in the day when I was a young fireman, I remember that every time we went to a high-rise fire, we had to carry at least one spare bottle with us, and a lot of times it was two spare bottles. So you're carrying your tools and two spare bottles. You are now a pack mule doing this. So this is helping us to make our people safer. So Jack?
Yeah, hi Mike and guys. Over the years, just taking a look at this, and I accidentally ran into this system when we had the FDIC West show. Me and Jim Allison were in a hotel and we saw this connection outside. So we did an investigation with the people in the building and sat down with Sacramento Fire and ran across this system. We saw the value here in this, in that aspect of having these systems in the building, particularly that the reliance of elevators. We all know the problems with that, and particularly when you're doing a lot of these search and rescues way above the fire scene. In New York City, the skyline is drastically changing, as you know, Michael. We're putting up mega high-rises. That's 420 feet and above. There's probably about a dozen of them going up in the city. So we have to look at newer technology and make that work for us. What I liked about this is that they meet all the standards in that, I was a fire director at a hospital. We had to keep going on the standards for testing the air systems and that out. The thing that I liked about it is that in San Francisco, they have the system in. They come along with an air truck with a connection on it, just like an FDC for a standpipe, and they connect into the building and supply the air in that. The other value I see here is when you put it in the buildings, and this is why we wanted to make it the appendix. Stop getting away from like 200 ordinances locally and standardize it. My intent here to take a look at this. Let's just say it goes in stair A. Every 5 floors you have a refill station, and Todd will connect in later because they have a little bit different system in that aspect. So what I saw the value here is that if you run out of air, you can get a quick connect, you know, and it's on the 5th, 10th, 15th floor and that. So, and the other thing we looked at is put them on a fail-safe lock. So when you get into the building, you can open these refill stations up. So I want to ask Todd to jump in here and see what they do. What I like about what Todd did is that they do the quick connect in the tower, not with fill stations. That's what they specified. The other thing, he's working with this a lot in the training tower at the academy. Todd?
And Todd, before you jump in, real quick, if you have a question, you're out there and you want to send us a question, if you do hashtag FETalk, we'll be monitoring that hashtag FETalk tagline, and we'll get your questions on here. Any questions about high-rise firefighting? We got some of the best minds in the business on this conversation right now, so please, I'll be watching my Twitter feed. That's hashtag FETalk. Sorry, Todd, take it away, buddy.
No problem. Thank you guys for the invite to be here today. Jack kind of talked about it. We actually saw the same system in Sacramento, and it was in 2002. Some of our guys were over there and looking around, and same as Mike said, is that a high-rise deployment with air becomes that critical resource. So we came back, and one of our big high-rises, one of our larger high-rises downtown is owned by a company called APS, which is one of the electrical companies. And we partnershiped with them and said, hey, let's try this thing out. And they jumped on board, and they were doing a kind of a remodel of their building, and they put the system into it. And so over the years now, we've kind of taken that and improved that system, and we've got about 24 of them in Phoenix that have either been retrofitted or new high-rises with the air system inside of it. We did, as you said, is that instead of a bank of air in there or anything, on all our incidents, you get a utility truck that has a compressor in it, and their assignment is to go to the exterior. It's always right next to the fire department connection, and they connect into it and supply the system with air. Maybe a little bit unique, or really from the members that are out there, we asked them what they wanted, and we decided we're going to go every other floor on the even floors going above ground, but as we go below ground, we go odd floors. And the thought is, as soon as you go below ground, you should have the ability to have air for that ability to get into it. So if you look at parking garages, things like that that are underground, we have that ability to build it back into it. And then expanded it, because I know we're talking about high-rises, but those big buildings that are, it's a high-rise on its side, and we have just a ton of them out here with, you know, distribution places, large spread-out areas, the ability to have that built into it, stadiums, anything you can think of of where air is going to be hard for us to manage, is to be able to put that system into it. Like you said, is that we do not use a containment system, so we use that quick fill connection on them. Ours have all over because we did an SCBA change within our department, we had to go back through all the high rises and retrofit those systems. And so now every box has 2 connections on them. But one of the things that, again, I'll go back to the members did a great job, is how do you, with multiple firefighters and a bunch of people that are inside the building, how do you keep that system going of filling air? And so our guys came up with a program now, is where they take about 200 feet of supplied air in with them. And so they'll go to the 2 floors, so the even floors connected in, and then they bring that line down to the resource sector, which is usually 2 floors below the fire, and they can just start filling bottles like mad, because we ran into questions about what if the stairwell starts to become contaminated, and you have multiple members lined up. So if you look at the front end of our deployment, it looks very similar to any building that you go to, whether it has an air system or not. Mike, you mentioned it. We're packing up. We're taking extra bottles, equipment, and everything else to get into it. But the neat thing is that on that resource floor, we can now start filling bottles with just that extra 50 foot of hose that you're bringing with you that gets you out of that stairwell, but puts you in a place that you can really, and it was pretty simple. The guy goes, look, if we hook into a standpipe and use a hose, why wouldn't we do the same? And now what we're doing is really supporting that whatever you call it, logistics or your resource sector 2 floors below.
And I see by doing that, you're keeping the guys in a tenable environment, and you're keeping them safe. And I think that's a great idea. And I think a lot of people who are dealing with these systems will probably jump on that idea, because I think that really puts a value to it, because you can not only be quick filling the packs, but you could be filling the spare bottles as you're changing people up and keeping your supply at a permanent level.
Yeah, you're dead on that. Is that the system is just playing with it and going and drilling with it. And Jack mentioned it, is that Rescue Air came out and actually retrofitted our old academy and put a system in there for us to be able to train on. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, well, it's probably more than that, probably about 5 years ago, we built a new academy. And we went to them and said, you know, we want to be able to train and be proficient with this system like we would anything else. Air is our lifeline. And so they came in, they put in a system into our new academy. But when you really got out there and you started to use it, it's a great system, but we really had to take the fireman side of it and figure out how we would use it so that it would work every single day. And it really came back to and Jack mentioned it, is you could probably do it with 5 floors, because really what we've eliminated now is the ability of everybody standing in the stairwell trying to fill up. And that's why I look even at that containment vessel. I'm not real sure how that would work, but the ability to hook in, set up that resource, because the members that are coming off that fire floor are going to be worn out. They're going to be tired. They're going to need air. You need to bring them down. And so really what you have to do is build that machine to keep this thing going.
And I think that's great. And I think I'm going to go turn it over to Kurt and ask about it. And because Kurt's been doing a lot of training in the high-rise firefighting aspect of this. And I think, again, it's going to go back into the training aspect of it, getting your people. It's almost going to be like an air and rehab floor. And have you dealt with this yet, Kurt? And if so, what do you think about it? And if not, and I'm not sure which it is, I think it's a great possibility. What do you think?
No, I think it's a great idea. You know, right off the bat, Mike, the first thing you said when you talked about the muling the bottles up, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I started working with the Destin Fire Department, Sandestin, and it was almost up till that point, the air is critical, but they were literally taking up bottles before they were taking up hose and nozzles. So I see this rescue air system putting us focused more on using our original resources to get up there and contain the fire, get water on the fire. Not saying the bottles aren't important, but there's a point where the staffing, because high rises is not an urban thing anymore. Escambia County 40 years ago had less than 5 high rises. Now we have over 100. So this is something that definitely we need to look into, getting into buildings, existing buildings and new buildings. To help it. One thing I was thinking about, you're talking about 2 floors below, is this could be one day also something for air for the civilians that we can't get out of the building, a way to hook them and shelter them in place 2 floors below or some, if the stairwells are contaminated, the elevators are out. So not just a firefighter air supply, but possibly in an emergency situation, a silver lining in that. This year, Rescue Air is actually sponsoring the High-Rise Operations Conference on Pensacola Beach, so I'll get a little closer look to it, and hopefully it's something we can grow. But training is going to be a critical thing to get the buy-in from the firefighters. In my first career job, I was actually a fire inspector, and I always go back to everything's got to be engineered. It's got to, we put in the building, and then we got to enforce it. So I'm excited about it.
I think that's great, and I think if I can, I'm going to turn it over to Jack for a question, because I think on part of this is, as you said, is the training, but it's also going to be the fire codes, putting the codes in place for this and getting the information, technical information, to the building owners, to the local fire departments, and how they're going to be able to use this stuff.
With that said, Mike, the thing is that when we went to put it through the codes in this cycle here, I worked with Ron Coleman out of California, Jim Tidwell out of Fort Worth. And the idea here is that once you do the codes, you got to get it in there somehow, what I call a foundation. And while the appendix is the foundation in that aspect, at least we took, like I said, those 400 different ordinances that were out there and made it one. So as you're going forward, that's the first step. The next step is see how we move it out to the front. And the front, I mean into the codes itself. So that will be a challenge for the fire service going forward, because everybody says things are cost impact. But this isn't that much of an impact in the building if you think about the grandiose lobbies that they all build in that aspect. Here, this is a minor thing here. The other thing too, let me just talk about the amount of bottles used in some of the fires. Interstate Bank in the 70s, I believe they used over 600 bottles. In the recent Chicago fires, where the people were killed in that, they used several hundred bottles. When you get down to the manpower that Todd said and Kurt said, it takes one firefighter per floor to transport 2 bottles. So if you think you're up 60 floors, think about how many firefighters you need for that. The other thing too is I look around and we're transporting bottles in hand carts, and particularly in urban settings, in nice weather. Try to do that in a snowstorm when you're trying to get them into the building. So these are some of the things that are adverse out there that the fire service has to take a look at and say, how does it work for me? The other question that comes up too is that smoke management. Well, we have it in the street, outside buildings. You use your 2 bottles, you can't go in again. Take that safety officer, put them up on the floor where you're tapping into the system. That becomes charged there. Then you have control at that level. We've learned in high rises that everything goes up with us. So the staging area goes up and everything else. Put that person in charge at the refill station.
I think that's great, and I think that, again, as we always say here when we're talking about fire engineering, which is the premier training magazine in the country, but when we talk about it, it goes back to the basics of training and the knowledge of the systems that are in your building. And as Kurt said, places all over the country are growing, and these high rises are coming, and they're going to be there. And I mean, some of the new stuff that's coming, the wood rises, as we've all seen out there, and things like that, we have to have air, we have to have the possibility. And the other thing is, unfortunately, for a lot of us, our manpower is being cut down, so we don't have the people to bring these bottles up. So using the system works very, very well for us. And Todd, I would like to ask you, I know you're training with it at the Academy. Have you had field use of these systems, and how did they go? If you used them at fires, how did they work for you?
We have not had a field use with it. We evacuated, we had a Sheridan downtown Phoenix here, had a transformer fire in there, but it was on the exterior of the building. The front end deployment as we were evacuating the building, the utility truck, everybody did what was expected of them as far as hooking into it, but we have not had to use this system. So it goes back to, because it's a limited amount, that front end deployment happens exactly the same. But again, on that one there, we went back and looked at what were the positives and negatives, and again, that came up as if we would have needed it, it was in place. And I think Kurt brought it up, was the thought process truly is if we can get people 3 or 4 that are evacuating down, we then again have the ability to put some air. I don't know what that looks like yet, but it definitely is one thing in the very beginning that we had never thought about, but that we are working on. And then Jack and Kurt brought up 2 great things, and I have to give the guys the kudos, was that it was a guy named Kevin Riley was the deputy chief that saw the system in Sacramento, and I mean, he worked on that probably for about 2 or 3 years to get it into place. But in 2004, it got into our code system, and it's funny now that it's been in there for what, 12 plus years. It's not even a factor anymore. That is just a portion of it. They did a great job of engineering it. Most people don't realize is that every one of those boxes, every 2 floors, has a shut-off valve. So if you get a leak above it, they test the air every year in the system or every quarter in the system. there's a lot of very positive stuff that was put into the fire code that makes that system reliable for us when we show up at 3 o'clock in the morning to be able to use it.
I think that's great. I think that's phenomenal. And I mean, having the ability to have a system like that to use, I mean, it makes it a safer operation. And again, the cost to the building owners, they're going to think about it, but it's probably going to help their fire insurance. It's going to help some of the fire insurance costs, of course. It's going to help some of the other things, and it's also going to protect our people. So I think it's a great thing. And again, it's got to be the interaction between the building owners, the code council in the city, and the city fire department coming together to realizing how good this system is and how well it works for us. And I think it's going to be a good thing.
Well, you know, one of the things I think that you know, as you listen to Jack and Todd talking about the code, you wouldn't think of building a mega building or a high-rise building today without standpipes. Well, this is just a standpipe for air. You know, we have to have that capability. So if you think about it, it's like a standpipe for your air. And so the way the system works is your air supply truck would hook up outside. There are storage tanks within the system on various floors, so you'll have air when you get there before the arrival of your air supply truck. But you're going to pump air to the building just like you would pump water to the building, which makes incredible sense when you look at it retrospectively. I mean, it's not we can't fight fire without an air supply. And when you think about when you think about the LA fire, that was 600 bottles, as Jack said. That was only 10 floors. Well, I believe that was like a 40 or 60-story building. Imagine if it had been 40 stories. You know, the effort that would have been taken. Or the LaSalle building fire, again, that was a 40-story building, but I think the fire was only on like the 10th or the 11th floor. So, you know, you could really, when you think about the manpower, you know, in a city like Los Angeles, they had the manpower. Philly, they had the manpower. But as Kurt just said, Escambia County, where the manpower, and no disrespect to Escambia County, but it's got a different response profile, different staffing levels. I think in LA they had over 400 firefighters at that particular fire. I'm not sure how many had at the LaSalle fire, but I think it was upwards of 200 plus. Kurt, what's your on-duty staffing in Escambia County?
I mean, we would be doing good for, I mean, a complete, you know, whatever alarms you wanted to call it, 3 or 4, 50 firefighters. I mean, that would be like, we would just be taxing to put 50, say, on Perdido Key. You're familiar with Perdido Key, driving over to, you know, Columbia Southern. Out there's 50 high-rises. We would be doing good. And that 50 firefighter, we're talking at least an hour, you know, response time. The one thing I wanted to add, when, you know, Mike was asking Todd about had they tried to test it, so many times firefighters, and, you know, when they say, well, we don't have high-rise fires. I talked about last year at ATROC is everything's going vertical. When I took my initial inspector's test 20-some years ago, the test question was 97% of all sprinkler buildings are extinguished with 3 or less heads. That number is actually increasing, not because sprinkler systems are not effective, but we truly haven't gotten to the second generation of them. Sprinkler systems really started hitting buildings in the 70s and into the 80s in a relation. So we're now getting buildings of an age where if the sprinkler system was going to fail because of its age, we're at that point. So my message to a lot of people is just because you haven't had a working high-rise fire or you haven't had a sprinkler system fail, it's just a matter of time. It's going to happen as we go vertical.
Well, and you know, Kurt, to just dovetail real quickly with Kurt, you know, you could have a system down for maintenance. You could have a system like the famous, you know, R13 code where it's residential, but it's only the common areas and such. I believe that's the correct number, Jack, right? Isn't it the R13 code that covers that? So you could have high rises that are sprinklered, but not completely sprinklered, just partially sprinklered.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a myriad of issues that come up when we talk about, you know, why we would need to have this there. But when you talk about 50 firefighters, how many of those firefighters could you detail to the logistical side of moving those bottles?
The other thing too, Bob, and you hit on it too. Once a certificate of occupancy is issued, everybody walks away from it. We inherit all these buildings, and over time they're renovated. People forget that. By me, they'll got several floors in New York City. Now I'm losing everything in that aspect. The sprinklers are taken out. Yeah, we have a temporary branch lines that they came up with and things of that nature. Now you're throwing a different fire load into those floors. The aspect here, when you're dealing with residentials, we're dealing with boxes. Not too many people have had open floor fires. Where you deal with 60,000 square feet of open floor space. And some of the things, and Michael alluded to this, the dirty secret in the fire department sometimes is they let it burn itself out. We can't handle it on the floor itself because you can't get onto the floor. So the idea here is that how do we sustain those people with air? If we're manning the deck guns and all that other stuff. Michael?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Some of the firefighting, some of the fires we have had in high-rise buildings, especially some of the high-rise buildings under construction where they used to use the oiled forms for the concrete and everything else, they couldn't handle them. And there is so much open square footage around that center core, and the only place you can get water on that fire is through the center core. But because of the standpipe systems and the limitations of the number of hand lines, if you have 30 or 40,000 square feet of office space on fire, you are not from the center core going to be able to control enough of that. And again, the fire is probably going to burn down to a position where we are going to be able to handle it. And that's going to happen. Under construction, there are other issues in these high-rises, especially with pouring concrete and wet concrete above you and the collapse potential. And again, these are all things that the ICs and the people in there are going to have to look at, and they're going to be part of the profile of the fire. What are we going to do? What's our attack profile? They talk about victim profiling, again, depending on the building. Is it an occupied building? Is it a residential? Is it an office building? Is it under construction? All of these things are part of the size up of that building and that firefight that we are going to do it. And then the resources, as from the New York City Fire Department, the Phoenix Fire Department, LA County, we're going to get a lot more people than Kurt's going to get in Escambia County, or that some people are going to get in some areas in Bergen County, New Jersey, in some other cities. I mean, very honestly, what we lost on 9/11 in the New York City Fire Department is almost the entire on-duty platoon in the Boston Fire Department. So, they have about 350 people on duty in Boston at any one given time. So you have to take all of these things into consideration when you are setting up your attack plan strategies of this building. And it's the profile of what's going on there.
Well, just to jump in real quick again and thank our sponsor, we're at about the halfway point. Rescue Air, for over 20 years, has been known around the world as the innovator and leader in firefighter air replenishment systems. Go to rescueair.com or just Google Rescue Air Systems. Take you right to their website. Please support these folks. They're going to be supporting Green County Tactics High-Rise Symposium. Did I get it right, Kurt?
HROC, High-Rise Operations Conference.
There you go, the High-Rise Operations Conference. Fire Engineering's been proud to help support that as well, which is a great little conference on high-rise firefighting. And we're going to talk about elevators and building information systems as well in this conversation. Our good friends at Rescue Air wanted us to cover as many high-rise topics as we possibly could in an hour. So in that vein, we do have a question from Joe Pernesti. Joe is going to be doing a webcast here on Main Street Fires next week. I believe it's the 8th. I believe it's next Thursday. He'll be doing a webcast on fire engineering. But he's got a question for us. And see what Mike and Kurt and Todd think about this particular question. He states, I have a 13-story, low-income, transient high-rise, no protection systems. Only one of two stairs pierce the roof, and the other one terminates on the 13th floor. My question is, which of those stairwells would you use for attack, and which would you use for evacuation if you needed to evacuate at all? Whoever feels like fielding that one first.
Well,
I would say, go ahead, Kurt.
I was just going to say that's pretty in depth. You go back to you know, what Mike was probably going to say is, you know, that it'd be nice if you open the one that accesses to the roof, but then once again, we're talking about flow pass, open it up. That's a great question. It's just pretty complex, you know, varying on the location of the fire. You know, on arrival of civilians, what else, you know, what stairwell does it seem they're already using? I mean, it's a great question, but there's just so many variables. What's the wind condition doing? Very, very good question. You know, complex build, and he's dealing there with, you know, lack of fixed fire protection systems. I don't even know if he could actually have an exact answer after 3 days on Pensacola Beach.
I agree with you 100%. And when he says no protection system, I guess he's saying that there is no standpipe system in that building at all, that they're stretching 13 floors. Is the way I understand that, and I might be incorrect there. But if that's the case, I think, again, it's fire location, it's the wind condition. I call it the hazmat answer. It depends. It depends. What is the current, you know, what's the chemical? What's the current fire conditions? Where are it? What stairway is going to give you the best access? And your people have to be really, really good. Now, if I were fighting that fire, again, I would think about, depending on where the fire is, probably 1 through 5 or 6 would be a stair stretch. But anything above that, if the stairways have, and I don't know if they do, have windows to the exterior, I would do an exterior stretch with a 2.5 up the outside of the building, tie it off. You got to make sure you get enough hose in there and it's tied off before you charge that line. But I would go with an exterior stretch if possible. And again, it depends on where the fire is, the location, and everything else, what staircase gives you access, and as Kurt so eloquently put it, what the civilians are doing. Okay, because if you got everybody in the A staircase and you decide to open up the door on the fire floor to the A staircase and there are people still above you because the fire's on the 3rd floor, you're going to have a problem. So the life hazard and the civilians are going to be the number one dictator of how we fight that fire.
And great point on that exterior stretch. Our good friend Clark Lamping from Clark County sent us a great video last week during their drill of doing an exterior stretch. You know, and I can't remember exactly how many floors they went, but phenomenal stretch, and they just tied off at the top. You know, we were always under the theory we had to tie off every 3 or 4 or 5 floors, but they just tied it off at the top, and the hose held up, and they did it several times and had very, very good results without having to occupy either one of the stairwells. They were able to do that. So great question. Thank you, Joe. And I guess we'll move on a little bit and talk a little bit, if everybody's okay, we'll move on to talking a little bit about elevators and what's happening with elevators. Todd, unless you want to chime in on Joe's problem. I'm sorry, Todd.
No, you can move on without me. No, the only thing that I had to add on that, and Mike and Kurt, I feel we're just dead on. There's a lot of what ifs, but the ability to control doors and control that smoke spread inside there, and if you got someone up there that can control the apartment door that's on fire, keep it closed, because you guys said it, whichever stairwell they use every single day is the one they're going to try to go to get out of that building. But someone leaving that door open upstairs and filling the stairwell, the ability to do that just makes things better. And trying to get the people out of there is going to be probably the number one priority. So that's all I got there, Bobby.
Well, Jack, why don't you give us an update on elevators?
They go up and down, Bob. All right, he didn't hear that. Okay. The elevators here are what we call occupant evacuation elevators, and this has taken a life of itself. It's coming out of the ASME Standard 17 on elevators and an FEO elevator, which is designed obviously for the firefighters. The concept here is, after, again, 9/11, how do we quickly evacuate the building prior to the arrival of the fire department? One way to come up with that was these occupant evacuation elevators. And the thing with that is they worked on this for 10 years, and my good friend out of Cambridge, Mass., John O'Donoghue, Ken O'Donnell, and Maver out of Charlotte put this together, working with the elevator industry. The thing was now how to put that into the code, besides the elevators, we had to take a look at the hallways, the elevator lobbies. Real quickly, we're required that if you have these OEO elevators, left and right of the elevator, they shall be enclosed with smoke barrier doors. We ask for vision panels in the doors too. So when the doors close, if the occupants are there waiting for the elevator, they can see changes. They leave on the door on the side of the elevator down the stairs. On that same stairwell, we created a second door for the firefighters to come in behind the fire barrier on the elevator. So now when they open that door up, they don't have to contaminate the elevator shaftway. There's going to be messages in these elevator cars, and here's a quick example. All right, if the fire is on 20 and the cars are above that, the cars will come down, drop on 20, tell the occupants to stay in the elevator, and the people will now come in, gather in the elevator, and go down. If you're waiting for an elevator and you press the button, the car will come up to you or below you and grab you. You're going to be message boards in the elevator lobbies too. The car is 2 minutes out. The car is 4 minutes out. We advise you to take the stairs. All right, in that aspect. There are also going to be a speaker in there too with a button for people with disability. The aspect here is that when you get into the building, just like everything else, you put it in phase 2. You recall the elevator. It's up to you. But the idea we saw is how do we move people as we keep going up in this building. These elevators will work. Obviously, the fire floor, they go there and grab them. Then they'll grab 2 floors above and 2 floors below. So when you press that button on the 21st floor, there should be an elevator coming, and it'll tell you the timeline. The other thing, too, is once we grab these people, all right, prior to your arrival, there'll be 1 or 2 elevators sitting below on, like, the 18th floor. So if you on the above floors press a button, the elevator isn't waiting for you. That's it in a nutshell, pretty quick. But the idea is that we're moving forward on how to make these work. That now becomes a problem for us, and now retraining all the occupants. We tell them don't take elevators. Now you have to retrain them. Basically, it's going to go into commercial buildings first. It might find its way into other buildings. New York City is looking at it now. I think there's one in Taiwan and a few other places. But it's going to be something that's coming in the future, and the fire service should be aware of that. On the second phase is the FEO elevators. What we found in these elevators, particularly in residentials, that the elevator box is too small for us. If I have a full company of 5 firefighters, I might be able to get 4 in there. So what we did is we made the elevator taller and deeper. I just came from the Freedom Tower. That elevator there for the fire service is probably 12 feet deep and about 12 feet high. So you can go in with a 10-foot pike pole. All right, probably put 2 companies in there to get upstairs. I like that a lot in that aspect. That's also good for EMS and everything to get the gurneys in there, make those switches. So these are value things that are coming forward and coming forward pretty quick. Again, let me go back to these megas. You're going to find these a lot more in these things, in that aspect of things. So that's basically where the elevators are and where they're going. You're going to find them out there coming your way pretty quick. It's not a solution here, and I'll emphasize this, for your problems with air. You can't be trading oranges and apples here. Oh, they have these new elevators, then we don't need, no. You need both here. In these high rises, we need redundancy. All right, I'm forever fighting. Yeah, it's sprinkled, but I still want my 1-hour door in the stairwell. You know what I'm saying? You can't trade all those things off. You need that balance here. Like I said, if this thing goes under renovations, I lose that. If I have the 1-hour door, at least I have something there to hold it back for a while. That's basically, real quick, what the OEO and FEO elevators are. Questions, guys? Go ahead.
Something real quick that near the end that you said there, Jack, about the sprinkler systems. My father's actually a fire marshal, and we always talk about when you get a sprinkler building, there's always those variances, you know, a lot farther to the exits, different things. And I try to tell my folks, if we have a working fire in a building that was built with a full sprinkler system and the sprinkler system fails, we got bigger challenges than a high-rise that was built without a sprinkler system based on the engineering. And I try to remind firefighters all the time, when you're pulling up on that new high-rise and the sprinkler system is unable to do its job based on many reasons, the challenges are greater than the high-rise without a built-in sprinkler system. And that's what we need to make sure that firefighters understand.
I think that's a great point, and I think the idea of the elevators, I think its time has come because of things like the fire on the West Side, Jack, in New York, the Strand, where the gay couple went into the staircase and one of the guys passed away, and the other one had life-altering illnesses, injuries. And then you had the two police officers down at Coney Island with one mattress, one twin-size mattress, not even a box spring, set on fire by a bored 16-year-old kid. And Officer Flores and Officer Guerra ended up in the hallway, and they took the elevator by mistake. They didn't realize. And Officer Guerra passed away, and Officer Flores, again, life-altering injuries to her lungs. I think the whole idea of the smoke stop in the elevator with the view panels for civilians, for people who end up in the wrong place, or even to evacuate the floor is a great idea, and I think its time has come for us. And I think having those elevators in place, and I also think the idea of having the fire service elevators now, the larger fireman service elevators, where it's not the old days. Okay, you got two guys from the truck and two guys from the engine. Make sure the nozzle's in there and the forcible entry tools, and we're gonna have two guys stretching a hose while we're waiting for the other elevator to get there to bring people up. I think being able to put a group of firefighters in the elevator to get to 2 floors below the fire and start their size up, start their tactical evaluation and everything else, it's a great idea. And I think the elevator's time has come. What do you think, Todd?
I agree.
Okay,
I talked with our fire prevention people, because I really hadn't been up a lot on the occupant egress one. And I was happy to see that they have been looking at that, looking at the code side of that. Jack mentioned it. We had a long conversation about changing people's mindsets, because almost every building that we go into, it'll say, in case of a fire, it has a sign that says use the stairwell but don't use the elevator. So it's a change that's happening, but what a great opportunity for that to move forward. A while ago, and it was pushed a lot from the EMS side, but it has worked for us, is the larger elevators, of being able to get the gurneys into there, having the ability to treat the patient. And it seemed that people recognized that and were a lot more acceptable to that being the change in the elevator versus maybe the fire side of it. But at the end of it, we get what we really are looking for, is that ability to put more weight, more tools, more firefighters into that elevator to be able to manage it. So we've done it across for everywhere from our airport all the way up to the new high-rises that are building. Within the code side of it, it has that ability to do that and to dump the people into it. So we're moving forward. I was asking about the occupant egress side of it, and it sounds like Las Vegas might be doing some stuff with that. And the code people said that on our side they were talking to the people in Vegas or Clark County. And I don't know if anybody else has had any experience. But one thing, hey Jack, maybe you can talk about is how do they protect the electronics in some of those elevators from the water and the smoke and stuff?
I can't get too much into depth on that, Todd, but I know that they're shielding it and everything, and that's something that is a good question that should be brought up later. I don't know the aspect, but I know diligently that O'Donoghue and O'Donnell were working on that to shield that the water away from the elevator. The other thing too is there's a drain in the lobby too, so to keep the water away from the elevator also. There were a lot of things built into this thing in the way of protecting the elevator. And again, once it's in here, these cannot be code trade-offs down the road. If you want these elevators to work, all these things shall be in place.
And I think that's one of the things for our members is getting the confidence in that once we get into this elevator that it's going to work. And that, hey, it's not going to be, I'm not going to get in here, my first crew or the second crew is going to be stuck in an elevator side of it. So I think we're going the right way, but there's going to be a little bit on the civilian, but there's also going to be with our own members of, hey, having confidence that I'm not going to get into this thing and be stuck inside this elevator.
And I think that's a very, very valid thing because, getting the elevators to work and especially getting the civilians in there, as how many times have people been, and I know the one on the west side of Manhattan about 3 years ago, with that couple went into the staircase. They were their apartment was 14 floors above the fire, and they ended up dying. The one guy died, and they were 10 floors above the fire, and so they were nowhere near anywhere where they were in danger from the fire because they were in a fireproof building or non-combustible building, but they were in the stairway, and the apartment door was open, and the hallway door was opened, and they got into the staircase, and they died in the staircase. And we have to educate our civilians that if there is a fire, they are going to they make sure that they understand that the safest place for them in a non-combustible building is going to be in their apartment unless it's their apartment on fire. And I know Jack wants to speak on this.
On the OEO elevators, the other thing that the code has to rethink too is that once you put these in, do we really need now? Here's something that they could look at, an area of rescue for people with disability. They have an opportunity now to go to that elevator. So that's something there that, again, with these new technologies come in, this works better this way, now we don't need that. Those were the things that you have something in place, well, that's no longer required if you put these elevators in. So that's the beauty of that.
I think that we talk about things like the air rescue systems, the firefighter air replenishment systems. We start talking about the kind of technology that air rescue is bringing to the fore. We're talking about occupant evacuation elevators. We're talking about changes in buildings. As Kurt mentions, buildings that are partially sprinklered or perhaps inadequately sprinklered due to renovation, as Jack brought up earlier, whether it's access stairs or any myriad of subsequent changes to the building that could affect the sprinkler design, or even just fuel loading that could have exceeded what that sprinkler system was built for back in the day. I think it's so important, and I'd like to touch on it before we run out of time in as much depth as we possibly can. How do we, and it's great letting the, and Todd brought it up, how are we going to let the occupants know that the building's a little different than maybe most buildings are in? How are we going to educate the people about these various systems coming in is critical. But also, how do we educate ourselves? How do we keep ourselves abreast of the changes to these buildings? I mean, if you're working in a city like New York City or Philadelphia or Denver or Phoenix, Los Angeles, San Diego, where you may have upwards of several hundred high-rise buildings, keeping all of that information straight and accurate, it can be overwhelming. And in the old days, we used to have running cards and dispatchers, and we had the books, but now we have technology, and technology can be a blessing, it can be a curse, but we now have systems, electronic systems. I'd like to touch a little bit, starting off with Jack, because I know Jack's very intimately familiar with some of the best systems out there, and give us a little update, and let's have a little conversation about how we can use some of these building information systems and technologies to better equip fire departments, responders to high rises, mega buildings, and buildings in general.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yeah, with the building information card, this came out of 9/11 in New York, where we testified, the fire directors before the city council in this said that we needed real-time information. That has now taken on a new life. The building information card is in the building code and the fire code 2012. NFPA 1620 has adopted it in a different format, but it's still there as that type of building information. ISO has adopted it in their training aspect. All right. So there are 4 or 5 things that are now out there, either as a code or a standard. And the recent one is smarter cities. Not smarter cities, smart firefighting. In smart firefighting, when they're dealing with now looking at our vital signs with chips and everything, they're also looking at building data information. And the aspect here is, how do I get this information out as quick as we can? The quick thing in New York, we made passive cards in high-rise buildings. So they're 11 by 17, there's information there. We said the next step is, how do I get that information out to the companies as they're coming to the scene, no matter if it's a high-rise or any other building. And in FBA, we took this card, which is intermediate, this is a work, more information, and the last thing is comprehensive. So on the basic information box for the building, for operations, obviously the address, type of construction, type of fire protection systems, all right? in that aspect. What stair goes to the roof, what goes to the basement. And electronically is the real-time day information, which everybody's missing. Are the sprinklers out on the 15th and 17th floor in this building? Are they doing renovations on 21 to 22? And that large warehouse that Todd has is zone 5 out for the sprinkler connections or the standpipe connections on that day. And what it is that the building owners in an electronic version can put that in electronically and give it to the fire department. The dispatcher can give it out to the local companies. They're saying that these are two real-time, or how would I say, real-time data going out here. The buildings are constantly evolving. Some of us are sitting on what I call passive data. It's been there for 2005, but who's looking at it in that aspect of things? When these buildings change, you need all that information. And what we're trying to tell the public, the firefighters, get away from guest-based knowledge on what you think is going on in the building. Make it more decision-based knowledge on what you know ahead of time about the building. The other aspect on electronics is I can give you safety and precautions in the building ahead of time. You went in, you vetted the building. I need 3 more apartment packs for the engine company. Ladder company can't ladder side A of the building in that aspect. The other thing, what about trusses and other things? In high rises, Todd and Kirk, it's coming your way, called ESS. All right, electrical storage systems, large battery rooms they want to put in, retrofitting existing high rises. Where's that information for the first responders? Cogen cogen furnaces. They're feeding you oil and gas. And if they do the gas side, it's a jet engine that has 100 psi gas pumped into the building. All right. So these are bigger buildings, and you can do this all the way down to two-story buildings. People say to me, that's a big challenge. Well, guys, you got to figure out your target buildings. How about doing all your buildings in just basic ops? Give me 12 lines, you're going out the door, and work it out. But the idea is that we put everything in place for the fire service. And I'm very frank with this. You have no place to hide. It's in the I codes, it's in the NFPA, it's in the ISO. And OSHA just picked it up on their thing too, on some of the fires too, talking about it, building information. So basically what we're trying to do is that we embrace computers, we got to embrace it more, what I call building intelligence. So who does this great on intelligence? The military. So we're paramilitary, we got to take that mindset for all our buildings and get it out there. I open it up to you guys.
Well, I think the building information cards and having the real-time data, and especially if they're updated the way they're supposed to be done by people in charge, fire safety directors, people who have licenses to do this stuff, is a great thing for the fire service because they're telling you exactly what's going on. In the city of New York, they're mandating the tags, they're mandating the discs, they're mandating notifications be made to the fire department. If I'm going to work on my 22-story building, I'm going to take the sprinklers out of service on the 19th floor to do replace sprinkler heads. They're loaded. They were painted by mistake, and I'm going to take them out. I got to let the fire department know under certain rules what's going on. If I'm taking my standpipe out of service on my 22-story building because we have to replace a valve, something's not working, I have to let the fire department know. They have to come do an inspection, and they have to know now that they're going to come to another firefighting challenge if they come to this building during this time frame. And that's all part of what we have to do is, as the fire service, we have to embrace this information, this technology that's out there, and get good with it, okay? And it goes all the way back to the rescue air systems, having them. We have to have the technology of the elevators. We have to embrace it because one way or the other, there's going to be the technology coming into the buildings, and whether we get it to work the way we want it to for our protection, our safety, or not, is going to be up to us. What do you think, Todd?
I agree with you where you're coming from, and I think one of the lining it up is how do we take this technology and use it? But you were a company officer there in New York, and you look at that front end of that response, and all the information that already before this stuff that you already have. You're thinking about, where am I at? Do I know this building? Where's the other companies? You're trying to maneuver through the street to get there. You're looking at the size up. You're thinking about, who's my crew with me today? Is it the normal crew or not? And we really, and I don't have an answer for it, is how do we manage information? And I think from our side of it, and just thinking about it, before long, we're going to have to send the information tech unit with you to the command post and stuff, because we're going to have really great information, but we're going to have to be able to manage it so that it's useful, it's great data for you to be able to do. But for you, coming up on that first ladder company, man, there's a lot of things already that's going on. We just got to figure out, how do we use that information so it's productive for us out there.
I agree wholeheartedly. Kurt, how about you? What do you think?
No, I definitely, we've already come a long ways. We're always wanting to get better, but with the MDTs, the computers, and more, apparatus, and chiefs having them, like Todd said, it's going to be almost, more information than one can handle. We're going to have somebody that's just digesting that information and deciphering through it. What Jack said is, the best thing, that I got out of what Jack said for myself was that passive information, that information that's 2 years old. As a battalion chief, the dispatcher calls me when a building's on fire watch. I had 2 calls yesterday. At 2 o'clock in the morning, am I going to remember those phone calls? Am I putting it down on a piece of pad, or am I going to have it on CAD telling me, hey, the system's out, on this building from these floors? So it's getting information that's up to date in the last 24 hours, not from 2005.
Yeah, real-time information, and I know Jack wants to speak on this too, but real-time information is great. So go ahead, Jack.
The thing real quick with the impairments too, when they call in for the impairments, it depends upon when you want the call. After 4 hours, after 8 hours. When that goes in, it tags the building, say the Empire State Building. At the 8-hour time, that pulsate said they didn't call me back. So there are reminders there for that aspect. The other thing too, Todd, to look at, and Kurt, is it's a lot of information. Break it down to that basic operation with 12 lines. The other thing too is that if you're, Kurt, you probably drive your own car. You don't have a chauffeur, right?
Only right now I have a chief's aide. It's probably 20% of the time I have somebody if they're out on an injury. That's it.
With that, you can't read the screen.
No.
You're watching where you're going and everything. But we have an ear. Why can't the dispatcher give me that 12 lines? When he hears all the companies get on the road, just announce it to everybody. And we always have that problem with the mounted devices in the car, no matter who it is, the officer or anything. You're always watching how you're going through the streets and everything. But that dispatcher, we keep overlooking that individual and giving them the 11 lines. Here's your script. This is what you say. In New York, they're great. Right?
Yeah.
I know that aspect. They're telling them. But other places in the country, that dispatcher has to be trained too.
And it goes back to that final thing, that training that we always go back to with fire engineering, with the articles on it, with everything else, the information in there. Is the technology can be the best technology in the world. If we don't have training and know how to use this technology, we're still going back to where we were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We have to have the training and the technology. So this has been a great hangout. I want to go through everybody for final thoughts. So Jack, I'll start with you because I saw you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Guys, there are a lot of new technologies out there now and a lot more coming our way. We have to learn to embrace these. We can't continue to do the thing when we phased out horses. The last motorized engine went out in 1926, 24. 20 years. So the idea here is that if everybody writes in, tell me if you have a flip phone. All right? Everybody's into more gadgets these days. Let these things do our job for us in that aspect. They're going to help us out. I want decision-based knowledge, not guess-based knowledge. Thank you, guys.
Jack, go ahead, Kurt.
I'd just like to say that, for the firefighters out there listening, high rises is not just an urban, big metro city thing anymore. It's all across suburban America. Communities are going vertical. I call a high rise a vertical neighborhood, and the fire service has got to prepare for high rises. High rise fires of the future, not the past, and we have to get more into the engineering side and being ready for that career fire in a high-rise. So just because you haven't had a high-rise fire doesn't mean you're not going to have one in your career. And thanks for the opportunity to be on the Hangout.
Well, thank you. And Todd, go ahead, please.
Thank you guys for allowing me to be here today and kind of hanging out. I'll just go back to the air system. You know, when we look at our ability to manage resources and that ability to manage air above when we start going up stairwells is really big. And it's taken a while for us to get this into place in the codes and train with it. But what a difference. I mean, the opportunity to have that, I think, will really make a difference on the fire ground. Thank you, guys.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I want to thank Fire Engineering for allowing us to do this Google chat today. And I'm going to turn it over to my good friend and brother Bobby Halton to say the final goodbyes. But I would also personally like to thank the Rescue Air Systems for sponsoring this and making this happen, because I hope some of this education is getting passed on to our members throughout the country and the world. Thank you. Bobby.
You know, there were a lot of things that were said today on this brief hangout, and thank you again to Rescue Air Systems for doing it. When we talk about firefighter air replenishment systems, one of the key things to remember is that by having these systems put into your code, you can eliminate a lot of the problems and a lot of the things we've just been talking about here on your future fire grounds. When we talk about the term high-rise, remember, they don't have to be restricted just to high-rises. Your mid-rises, even some of your low-rises, when you think about the new construction where we're doing the new taxpayer, where you have your first floor is going to be a non-combustible with multiple occupancies that are all commercial, and then above it we're putting up to 3, 4, 5 floors of residential. Another great place to use this technology so that firefighters will have air when they need it, where they need it, without this incredible logistical demand that's often placed upon us to move those bottles to the staging floor. Again, a very important point that was brought out: information without analysis is useless. So get other people to help you that aren't in the context, that aren't under the kind of pressure that the firefighters are on scene are, whether it's a command team as they use in Phoenix, or whether it's utilizing your dispatcher and your FIT officers. Get people to help you analyze your data. We talked about the elevator, occupant elevators coming in the future, the new firefighter elevators that are coming in the future. There's some great stuff coming. The information system, the electronic data information system that Jack was talking about, can help you to make better decisions on the fire ground and be safer and more effective firefighting. One thing I will throw out at the end, and two things I'd really like you to consider if you could possibly make it. On October the 10th at Citi Field will be the first national stair climb sponsored by the NFFF and the FDNY. If you're in the area, please make an effort to attend. If you can't, there's a virtual stair climb. Please go to the NFFF website, look at National Stair Climb, and see if you can help support it. The Firefighter Cancer Support Network Gala is November the 7th in Los Angeles. Just go to the Firefighter Cancer Support Network website, and please, if you can participate, that would be greatly appreciated, as always. To all our guests today, Todd, Kurt, Mike, Jack, thank you so much. You guys are incredible, incredible amount of knowledge. From everybody here at Fire Engineering, thank you for spending your afternoon with us. We hope you have a rest of your day is outstanding, and we'll see you again here next week. And don't forget, Joe Pernesti, Main Street Joe, will be doing a webcast with us on the 8th on Main Street Fires. I'm Bobby Halton. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us, and we'll see you down the road.